Seriously, welcome to Beyond Baroque. Welcome to the second Writers Resist. Thank you all for coming out today. Uh, 2018 marks Beyond Baroque's 50th anniversary. This is the first weekend of our 50th anniversary events. Yesterday, Liza Featherstone of The Nation gave a talk at 4 p.m. Then at 8 p.m., Jack Hirschman and Jessica Ceballos read and talked about poetry and activism. So here we are again this Sunday afternoon, keeping the resistance going. And as part of Beyond Baroque's 50th, we're going to keep that attitude going all year long. We have a lot of special programming coming up throughout the year. Check the website for it. I don't want to take up too much time because this is a special event. We have a lot of readers and a lot of people have come a long way to be here. So once again, thank you for coming. And I'm now going to introduce your host for this afternoon, Jim Natal.
Well, hello. Well, as we were saying out in the lobby, we were hoping we wouldn't have to do this again this year, but we are. Well, as Richard said, I'm Jim Natal. I'm one of the Writers Resist organizers, and I want to welcome you to Writers Resist 2. And what's interesting about this one is last year, for those of you who were here, it was part of a national and basically international effort of readings all on the same day. This year, it's us. So LA. So I want to thank you, as Richard did, for being here with us today to show your resolve, your resistance, and your support. And very special thanks to all our participating writers and poets who will be reading for us shortly. I'm so sorry to announce, however, that due to illness, David St. John won't be able to join us today. We wish him a quick and full recovery. He did, however, ask us to express his deep and profound regrets at not being able to be here in person. He is here in spirit, however. And he wants to thank Beyond Baroque and all the distinguished readers who are here today and all in the audience for their continued belief in the power of literature and human voice and in the ongoing power of resistance. I personally want to extend immense gratitude to Writers Resist co-organizers Emily Vizzo, who many of you saw out by the front door, and Lynne Thompson. Thanks also specifically to Richard Modiano and Quentin Ring of Beyond Baroque. Our event sponsor, PEN Center USA, event partner, ACLU Los Angeles, and the tech team from USC who are recording video of this event for uploading to YouTube later this week. Also, we are live tweeting this event, so feel free to tweet to @WritersResistLA, and Emily will retweet it, and we'll be just a flock of birds out there. Also, I want to thank Jen Bruce, who did our wonderful Writers Resist theme art, and Tanya Baban for her graphic design skills. Yay! A couple of quick notes before we begin. Let's start with the obvious. If you haven't already done so, please turn off your cell phones. Yay. We have for sale today, out in the lobby, these officially licensed Writers Resist pins. They will be collectible someday. And they are for sale at the ACLU table out in the lobby. All proceeds from sales go directly to the ACLU. And in case you were wondering, our buttons are US made by a certified women's owned business. Yay! And of course, the ACLU will be happy to take larger donations than a button purchase. So please think about that, because they are our front line and one of the best walls that can be erected, you know, and it's not, and they're not on the border. If you're not already a PEN Center USA supporter or Beyond Baroque member, please become one today. Now, with great pleasure, we're going to have a few words from our partners and sponsors. I'd like to introduce first Spencer Wins from ACLU Southern California, and then Natalie Green will be here from PEN Center USA. Spencer?
So I'm just going to talk really briefly to y'all, and I'd like to talk about failure. Now, I know this is a room full of writers, and you never experience any failure. Life is just a stream of peaches and cream. But you know what? The ACLU is going to be 100 years old in 2 years. We're the oldest civil rights organization in America, and we have experienced a lot of failure. Our very first big trial was the Scopes monkey trial in 1923, where we went to bat for a science teacher who taught the science of evolution and was arrested, and we lost that case. Then 20 years later, we went to bat for Japanese Americans who were being interned by the government in concentration camps. We fought in the Supreme Court in the Korematsu case, and we lost that case. And then in the 80s, we expanded our mission for social justice. We went to bat for gay rights. We tried to overturn America's sodomy laws in Bowers versus Hardwick, and we lost in that case. I bring this up because in America today, no school teacher is being dragged off and being arrested for teaching science. The internment of Japanese Americans is considered a great national shame. Even Ronald Reagan apologized for that one. And guess what? We won on gay rights, and we won on marriage equality. The reason I bring that up is because the key factor in all that is the ACLU doesn't quit up, we don't give up, and we persist. It has been a hell of a year, as you all know. And if you're like me, you're a little bit tired. I'm a little bit tired. We have filed 119 legal actions against the Trump administration. And, you know, I'd like to say that it's getting easier, but it is not. If you remember a year ago, we were rushing to LAX to intervene in the cases of people who were being detained and sent back out of this country who had a legal right to be here with the first version of the Muslim ban. We won that case. We defeated that. So they brought out Muslim ban 2.0. We went to court. We won that case. We defeated it. Now they have Muslim ban 3.0. This case, I will say, this executive order actually was crafted by a lawyer who knew what he was doing, not Stephen Miller. And it's a lot harder to crack. So we're going to have to go all the way to the Supreme Court. We'll probably be there this spring. We have 4 cases in front of the Supreme Court this season, including a groundbreaking immigration case and the biggest gay rights case since we won marriage equality. So this is what this is now. It is no longer about the enthusiasm that comes with that first adrenaline rush of realizing you're in a disaster. Now it's about recovery, it's about resistance, it's about being persistent and not giving up, because we're not going to stop. We are 350 attorneys against 18,000 in the federal government. So it is David and Goliath, but you know what? We win. And we have won and won and won. We stopped the trans ban, the trans military ban. We've held up much of the immigration. We just filed our class action suit in preparation for the government failing to fix the issue for the Dreamers. And if this is not resolved in the next few weeks, we will go to court. And that will be the biggest fight of 2018. 800,000 American kids rely on us winning that fight. That's why we need your support. That's why we're out here. That's why you're out here. I'd like to encourage you to come buy a pen. Jacqueline, who is one of the members here, donated a book, Not My President, which is an anthology of dissent from Thought Crime Press. We're selling this for $15. All proceeds go to us. And I have this lovely little device that allows me to take money out of your credit cards. So please come and talk to me. Tell me your ACLU stories, because a lot of people here in this room have been longtime supporters, and we love you, and I'd love to hear them. And please come support us. We need your help. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Natalie Green. I'm the program coordinator at PEN Center USA. We're one of 2 domestic branches of PEN International, which is a leading literary arts and human rights organization. And we're actually currently undergoing a professional membership vote to unify with the other U.S. branch, PEN America, in New York, in an attempt to make a stronger and more unified organization for all of U.S. to fight for First Amendment rights. So if you have any questions about PEN USA or the unification of our membership, please find me. We're also at a table right outside, and I also have a swipe that can take your money. We're really excited to be a co-sponsor of this event with Writers Resist. Of course, First Amendment rights are very close to home for us, and we can't wait to support all the writers who are reading here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Natalie and Spencer. We are so happy to be able to have such organizations on our side. One quick note for everybody, especially for the readers, watch this back tripod leg. It's just kind of hanging out there, so kind of come around or come from this side. As some of you may know, I worked in a creative capacity for the National Football League for many years. I got to hear all kinds of stories and anecdotes, but I kept thinking of one in particular as we were planning this event. A local sports writer was in the locker room late after a practice with New York Giants head coach Bill Parcells. And the journalist was bemoaning that all the romance had gone out of sports writing. And so Parcells, who, if you remember him, was a pretty imposing guy, looked at him and said, "You're a sports writer, put it back." Well, some very important things have been taken from America in the past year, with many more, as we just heard, in imminent danger, including truth. We're writers. We have to put them back. With that, I'd like to introduce our first reader today, Ralph Angel.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks to everyone who worked so hard to put this event together, and to all of you for coming. I'm going to read a poem today that I translated not too long ago. It's by Vicente Alejandre, the great Spanish poet and Nobel laureate. He's an interesting guy. He was born in 1898. In his middle 20s, he contracted what would be lifelong disabling tuberculosis, and would lead to many other illnesses. At the end of the Spanish Civil War, he went into self-imposed internal exile. He refused to acknowledge the existence of the government, and he refused to acknowledge the existence of the dictator Francisco Franco or ever speak his name. While Franco was crushing poets and writers and intellectuals with imprisonment, exile, and even assassination, he left Alejandro alone. Over and over he'd say, "He's crippled, he's feeble, he's gonna die tomorrow." So despite Franco, I'm sure, Alejandro lived into his late 80s. He outlived Franco by a decade. And 2 years after Franco's death, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. God bless poetry. One's own empathy can be found there, and so too the empathy of humanity. And from empathy comes dignity. and the two together are a kind of resistance that is uniquely human. Para quien escribo, who I write for. Historians and journalists and people who are just curious ask me, who do I write for? Well, I don't write for the man in the snobby jacket or for his angry mustache, not even for the admonishing finger he raises in the sad ripples of music, nor for the woman hidden in her limo, her lorgnette sending a cold beam of light through the windows. I write perhaps for those who don't read me, that woman who runs down the street as if she had to throw open every door for the sunrise, or that old man napping on a bench in a small plaza while the setting sun cradles him with love, wraps him up and dissolves him gently in its light. For everyone who doesn't read me, all the people who don't even care for me, though they care for me, but don't know it. The little girl who looks up at me as she passes by, my companion on this adventure, living in the world. And the old woman who sat in her doorway and witnessed life and bore many lives and many tired hands. I write for the man who's in love, for the man with pain in his eyes, for the man who looks away when he walks by, for the man who finally collapsed when he asked his one question and nobody listened. I write for them all, but I write mostly for the people who don't read me, each one and the whole crowd, and for the breasts and the mouths and the ears, for the ears that don't listen, hear my words. But I write also for the murderer, for the man who closed his eyes and threw himself at somebody's heart and ate death instead of dinner and woke up crazy. For the man who puffed himself up into a tower of rage and collapsed on the world. And for the dead women and the dead children and the dying men. And for the person who turned on the gas and destroyed the whole city, and the dawn broke upon a pile of bodies. And for the innocent girl with her smile, her heart, her sweet holy medal, and a plundering army went through there. And for the plundering army that charged into the sea and sank. And for those waters and the infinite sea. No, not infinite. For the finite sea, with our human limitations, like a breathing lung. At this point, a little boy jumps in and splashes about, and the sea, the heart of the sea, is in his pulse. And for the last look, for the last, most limited look, in whose arms someone sleeps. Everyone's asleep. The murderer and the innocent victim, the elderly and the just being born, the dead and the damp, the withered mind and the wild head of hair. For the bully and the bullied, for the good and the sad, for the voice with no substance and for all the substance in the world. For you, human being, who will never be a god, who, without caring to look, is reading this poem. For you and everything alive inside of you, I am writing. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce a wonderful poet, powerful human being, Dorothy Barresi.
Hi there. Thank you to the organizers of this event. Thank you to PEN, Beyond Baroque, of course, the ACLU. Thank you. I wanted to read 3 poems today in rather rapid succession about the climate of intimidation and fear and the masculinist idea that violence is glory. The first poem has an epigraph. It was something that our current president spoke at a campaign rally in Las Vegas in 2016. This is his quote. "You know what they used to do with a guy like that in a place like this? They'd carry him out on a stretcher." This poem is called Election Noir. Election Noir. Tight, taut teeth and lips a little wet, a little hunch at the shoulders, spite and seam. Wet lips, jaw rubbed, that swell. Tight, tense talk and leering merit of American man, quick at the eye. A small-mouthed man, mean to mean on, cracked and pricked. Sure, sure, if that's how you want it. Twitch-lipped. Attention, please. A short, shocked man is getting stiffed on a dead plot packing heat. A bare-fisted havoc man coughing mid-century blood. More cemetery press than kiss. More war, more guns, more prick to take it neat. Wet lips, nervous tick, cold clocked, cold cock, gut shot. A tight-fisted, faithless twitch of a white heat man with a hit, a hook, a jab, no hunch. Pour him a stiff one. Hand him his hat. Where's this train heading? Seething in grief, brother. Madness, seething, and grief. What we did while we made more guns. Prayed, dug mass graves, raped the daughters of the enemy who, in their terror, turned back into swans, placed war orphans in loving homes, pinned honorifics to field-dressed shadows, recruited homme noir to fill empty jail cells, and swans with their coruscating metallic cries to lend comic grace to memorial fountains. The exchange of gifts, the games, the tilts, the jousts, the masks proceeded without irony. The year's cotillion was elegantly attended by debutantes in a glowing orange and red silk tent before an amputated audience of officers, some crying, some propped on tiny keepsake pillows. We prayed for peace through victory, sang the old hymns, it's me, it's me, it's me, O Lord. Planted winter wheat, let it rot. The alcohol smells sweet and scouring. Planted corn, ate the mice that overran the field instead, blood and small hides in our cupped hands, and purpose, our hair dripping as though we had just stepped from a bath with our beloved. The dead we have with us always. Livestock were fed broken chocolate bars to fatten provisions quickly. Guts ruined, they bellowed all night, but we were sleeping only 2 or 3 hours now. There was so much to do. Tunnels to torch, missile silos to polish with our hair. Cops and students of political science orated like gods in parking lots, decorated with thousands of yellow ribbons. Red searchlights scalded the possible flight paths of our urgency. Everyone useful, finally. Everyone making corrections to sacrifice, beauty to conviction. Paying prisoners of war 1 bucket of water for the truth, 2 if it wasn't any good. This last poem is called LAPD. LAPD. We are waylaid and slaughtered for our beauty. We rattle palm fronds, siren the sick limb in any airless night, cut it off. We kick high, correct clocks, and the poor on the stoop in their Nike shower shoes, cursing intractabilities. A still boy, who, muttering to himself all morning, had paced the center divide, palsied, rope burned by exhaust, cooperates fully now at our feet. We are the fuck that matters. We protect sightlines, we serve sightlines. Here lies. We jack conviction Smile. Consent decree. All inconsolable people look the same. Wrung hair, eaten face, tears. Consent decree. All inconsolable people sound the same, like supernatural whale cries off the shiftless Pacific, plying April's migration routes north. Why do they home here? Instinct, why, if not to save themselves, and blew the air and the hour of kick down doors. And the body camera turns us on. If only it showed our faces, we are that beautiful. We afterward Los Angeles. We marry a jury of our peers. Your Honor, even when he walked backwards, then kneeled as instructed, with his hands on the back of his head as instructed, and lying prone as instructed, kept his hands on the back of his head as instructed, face eating the burning tar, I was afraid as instructed for my life. No one is perfect here. We jack the need that fucks us up. We bruise wrists. We kick, drink, one wife, one husband at a time. We are transparent. Our faces no longer appear in the mirrors that shave us or put on our makeup. Call us carefully. Red sirens, skin knights, feedback loop. A service revolver is only as good as its lawyer. In San Pedro, Crenshaw, Montecito Heights, El Sereno, the valley of the shadow of the Deathward Mall and the all-night plasma drop-in centers, we trouble slaughter. We carry your eviction. We are on your hands. Let it be on your head, our beauty, when we come riding, towing the line. Thank you. Thank you very much. Another fabulous writer. It's going to be a whole couple of hours of fabulous writers. My privilege, my pleasure to introduce Victoria Chang.
Okay. How's everyone doing? That's 3 poets in a row. Are we okay? Okay, yeah, that's it for a little while. Okay. So thanks for coming. I'm going to read 4 poems. The first one is not by me, and then the last 2, our theme is climate. The last 2, I don't know if there's the climate theme, but I just felt like reading them. This one is by Craig Santos Perez, and he's written these, he calls them love poems in the time of climate change, and they're these sonnets that are just really interesting. So I'm just going to read one. It's called Sonnet 12. And thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to the organizers. Here goes. Global woman, waxy apple, record heat, thick smell of algae, burnt peat and sunset. What rich nitrogen opens between your native trees? What fossil fuels does a man tap with his drill? Loving is a migration with butterflies and refugees, with overcrowded boats and no milkweed. Loving is a clash of petrostates and 2 bodies detonated by a single drone strike. Kiss by kiss, I walk across your scarred landscape, your border walls, your dam, your reservations, until our little extinctions transform into peak oil and push through the narrow pipelines of our veins until we bloom wide like water hyacinth, until we are, and we are more than a fracture in geologic time. The second poem I'm going to read is one of my own, and this is, I think, the first on-demand poem that I've written, so I don't think it's very good. But it's in Zizava's. Do we know Zizava? It's a great journal, and it's their art and resistance amid turmoil issue, which is, I guess, the first time they decided to kind of address these issues in their journal. And so I'm an immigrant's kid, so my parents growing up were much more concerned about food on the table, jobs, and things like that than protesting or resisting. And so I kind of thought it might be interesting to write a poem about that. This is called What If My Mother... What if my mother never protested, was never pro anything, never probed beyond the small yard where the bees lived with their constant buzzing? What if my mother matched the bees in their compliant striped dresses, minding their own business, afraid to wander too far from the work that paid honey, afraid to wander too far from the one queen they served? But maybe the bees are not just working. Maybe the bees make all that noise because they are hiding things, because they don't like where they live, are really livid, not timid, just little serfs in striped furs. Maybe the bees are not protégés to one dictator, but actually protesting. Maybe the bees are meeting each night in secret chambers about the queen and trying to make change to overthrow her because she eats all the royal jelly. What if all I do is have parties? What if I don't do anything? Let others do everything, like my mother who came to this country at 20, afraid to do anything because she was finally free. What if we all do nothing, drink tea while filling our notebooks like the secretary bird with its long neck and pen-like feathers, fill the sky with ideas, ideations of ideas, full of ideology, full of idiocy that no one ever reads. One day the moon will turn off with a click like a light switch someone pulls in a prison. We won't be able to see the ideas anymore. Our eyes won't ever adjust to the lack of light, but in our ears the bees will keep screaming, and we can only imagine them disappearing. And I'm just going to read two more, and my mom passed in 2015, and I've just been working on this manuscript that's kind of like prose poems that are kind of just distilling grief, I call it, just thinking about grief. And I was listening to NPR and I heard this person make a documentary on obituaries. It was called Obit, so that gave me an idea to write these thin, long obituaries, which I noticed sort of when someone passes that you care about, just everything, at least in a period of time, at least, everything dies. So just everything dies. So this is one obit. It's called Grief. I'll just read two of these and then we'll move on. Grief. Grief as I knew it died many times. It died trying to reunite with other lesser deaths. Each morning I laid out my children's clothing to cover their grief. The grief remains, but is changed by what it is covered with. A picture of oblivion is not the same as oblivion. My grief is not the same as my pain. My mother was a mathematician, so I tried to calculate my grief. My father was an engineer, so I tried to build a box around my grief, along with a small wooden bed that grief could lie down on. The text kept interrupting my grief, forcing me to speak about nothing. If you cut out a rectangle of a perfectly blue sky, no clouds, no wind, no birds, frame it with a blue frame, place it face up on the floor of an empty museum with an open atrium to the sky. That is grief. I'll just read one more. And I guess in terms of climate, that one had a sky in it. And this one has flowers. So this one's called The Blue Dress. Thank you again. The Blue Dress. The blue dress died on August 6, 2015, along with the little blue flowers, all silent. Once the petals looked up, now small pieces of dust. I wonder whether they burned the dress or just the body. I wonder who lifted her up into the fire. I wonder if her hair brushed his cheek before it grew into a bonfire. I wonder what sound the body made as it burned. They dyed her hair for the funeral, too black. She looked like a comic character. I waited for the next comic panel to see the speech bubble and what she might say. But her words never came, and we were left with the stillness of blown glass, the irreversibility of rain, and millions of little blue flowers. Imagination is having to live in a dead person's future. Grief is wearing a dead person's dress forever. Thank you. And our next reader is Bernard Cooper.
Hey, everybody. I want to thank Jim for inviting me and all the organizers as well. If you had told me a couple of years ago that I would lose countless hours of sleep over the host of The Apprentice, I would have been skeptical, to say the least. So my lifelong insomnia has increased to a pretty unbearable point, and late one night I decided, instead of fighting insomnia, that I would actually write a manifesto in support of it. And I used as my model the Futurist Manifesto, full of hyperbole and trying to rouse people. So this is called the Insomniac Manifesto. Sleep is the opiate of the masses, a retreat from the teeth-grinding and ceaseless thinking that is our true calling as humans. What use is the body sprawled on cotton, as still as a statue? We who toss and turn each night, we sentries fretting in the moonlight say, deep sleepers everywhere, awake. Rise from your beds, free yourself from the stranglehold of blankets, shed your flimsy bedclothes and don a scratchy woolen suit, chafing shoes and belts and watch bands, the glorious clothes of consciousness. Dreams are nothing more than deception. You hold the winning lottery ticket. The dead one returns to your arms at last. The exam is passed with flying colors. The speech delivered, even though you are nude. O dozers and catnappers and denizens of Nod, you must turn your backs on the illusory satisfactions of the dream life. Surrender yourself to churning worry, to indecision, to doubts as bright and numberless as stars. Warm milk, bounding sheep, amber bottles of Ambien. Where have they gotten you? Half your life squandered. Time that would have been better spent regretting the past and dreading the future. Think of it if you're not too groggy. You might have constructed grain after monotonous, painstaking grain, a mountain out of a molehill. You say you need your 40 winks? Go ahead and make excuses, each as thin as a well-worn sheet. A life where pale dawns are lost is no life at all. We, the bleary-eyed, the perpetually restless, the not for a moment seduced by sleep, we tell you there's light in pots of black coffee, high adventure while pacing the floor. While others slumber, insensible, we urge you to make yourself irate by recalling old slights. To see the unstoppable progress of time by studying your face in the bathroom mirror. To embrace the terrors of kidnap, plane crash, and coronary by watching late-night TV. You must make your palates from brittle straw. You must fling your limbs at uncomfortable angles, each less conducive to sleep than the next. You must picture the mites, mandibles and all, who inhabit your mattress. Listen, rousing new tunes have replaced the quaint music of crickets, the mumbling of doves on a window ledge, the rain's drowsy, insistent whisper, gunshots, sirens, car alarms, raging dogs, squalling babies, couples fucking like wildebeests. Why disregard this wealth of noise for a meager lease on oblivion? What you hear is an anthem throbbing through the walls. Stand up, comrades. Look alive. We must reconsider the meaning of sleep. We must think again and again and again. Thank you. So the next reader, Marcia Delahoy, is someone whose work I've been really infatuated with for a long time now. I first read her work in the New Yorker and was completely startled by how beautiful it was and how it seems to be able to put words to nearly ineffable feelings, things that I felt but never been able to express. She is the author of 2 collections of poetry, most recently the beautifully titled Antidote for Night, which won the Isabella Gardner Prize. Marcia.
Just before Marcia reads, just to put you in a little suspense, anybody that needs seats, these seats back here are wide open, so please come down and have a seat.
Don't be shy. Yeah.
Come on. Let's go. Get chairs.
Don't be shy. Thank you to everyone in this room, to everyone outside this room, at those tables, and to all of us who are working on resistance. May it change everything according to the tenets of chaos theory. I have one poem. I wrote this poem about 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking mainly of gender. I consulted with another species to write it, and I think more and more that's necessary. It's trying to stand in a different relationship to gender and power, to other life forms, to Earth. The first 2 words of it are Koyu Abe, and that's the name of a Buddhist monk in Fukushima. It's called Helianthus, which is for sunflower, means sunflower. Helianthus. Koyu Abe hands out thousands all over Fukushima. Drifts of Amazons stretching up in abandoned yards, empty towns, alongside the nuclear plant. Consider the body as a unit of measure, a span, a fathom, a cubit. Can you figure your distance from radiance, from light home, sun house, life mass? You pass a field of sunflowers in Spain. You're on a bus. I don't know you yet. Have you ever been so happy? A cubit for each face, a digit for each ray. Endless faces, countless rays. This granary, this cluster feast. Van Gogh's painting sunflowers. Here's gratitude and dying every day. Here's waiting on the beloved. Would Gauguin come? Let me stay in the compass of my heart. And something grants his prayer. He's already there in blossom and blossom and blossom. The whole thing, a symphony in blue and yellow. 2 million standing in Fukushima. Hundreds rearing up at road's edge, an entire field of bisexual enigma stars nodding their heads. Say evanescence. Say inflorescence. He says, God damn, you're pregnant, God damn. Wondering or displeased, or both. Was she ever the bride? Maybe she is now. 1,000 queens, each keeping a secret, 1,000 clandestine florets, pollinated by drunkards, by wade in the water bees, up to their knees in pollen. Up to their knees in nectar, fetlocks covered with pollen. The world doesn't need us to know it exists. At the base of the flower, a door and a hall of hidden chambers to conceal, to save, seeds salted away in the compass of their bed, chaff for linen, perfect packages packed in a spiral, growth of hair on a baby's head. I dress her in corduroy, and she toddles into the field toward a giant, full fathom, 2. Long green muscled trunk fuzzed and prickled, downward gazing head, catching light, to card and spin, weave the thread, thrust color back into the world, a symphony in blue and yellow, mind the child. What if we're like electrons in 2 places at once, up to our knees in nectar, fetlocks covered in pollen? Why not let joy stick? We could start over, fathom anew in flower speak, streaming tip of cytoplasm, corolla's open lips, to smelt, to palp, flush-fleshed, brim in a flash, come, love that, come, slake me. Thank you. Up next is a wonderful writer I don't know named Dana Johnson.
Deep thanks to the organizers of this event. Before the election, I had a discussion with my mother-in-law, who is a white 81-year-old Alabamian. And in this discussion, I told her how I was feeling very frightened and feeling a likelihood that Donald Trump would be elected. And she said to me, "Oh, Dana, you're just afraid to hope. There's no way he's going to be president." And I adore my mother-in-law, and she's a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. But it got me thinking about the fact that inevitably we're living in different racial climates, different racial experiences. And so I started working on a novel that's untitled. And so I thought I'd read a section that sort of came out of this conversation. She was right about Doug Jones, though. I have to give her props about that. Yes. So this character is named Reed Williams. The chapter is called Reed Williams, the son of a black man. And he's married to a white Southerner by the name of Andy. And he is, very much like myself, born and raised Los Angelino. There is no need to concern oneself about every little thing. So much in the world is meaningless. Only some things matter. One's goal in his or her life is to understand who and what matters. My father taught me this. In every story he tells me about growing up back home in Tennessee, there is a lesson. The lesson is this: in America, some citizens matter and some citizens don't. As a people, blacks always, always must be calculating, dismissing, absorbing, confronting quietly, or sometimes confronting with loud, collective voices the fact that our lives don't matter as much to some people. America was founded on this principle. Our Constitution says that all men are created equal, that this assertion is self-evident, and this document was vetted and signed by a man who owned his fellow Americans, who had sex with an American he owned, and then owned the children that he fathered. In his heart, he may have believed that these lives mattered as much as the lives of his white children. But because it was imperative that he deny his desires to touch and feel and smell and perhaps even love the person who was supposed to be a thing on the list of articles he paid for, he had to deny that desire and that love. He would never set free these items, these articles, belongings, possessions, because to do so would prove that all men and women are created equal. When as time passed, America could no longer lie to itself. It still tried. It fought the truth as hard as it could. Some Americans were willing to die for this denial. They were willing to separate themselves from those who did not believe as they did. Their leaders, their vice president said, in fact, that the cornerstone of their beliefs as a confederacy was that all black men and women were not created equal to whites. Andy did not know this fact because, I told her, white Southerners only like to know some history. History is divided because as much as some love tradition and heritage, which tradition and what heritage is cherry-picked? Google it, I said, it's there. Well, I'm just saying I didn't know, Andy had said. I'm not saying that you're a liar. But I needed her to know. I opened my laptop and found excerpts of that speech and slid the computer to her so that she could read it. I didn't want her to take my word for it. I wanted her to know on her own. My father has never trusted me to find out any of this on my own. From since I can remember time, when I became aware of time and place and who I am, who we are as black people, what being black means in America, my father has told me history. Not how American history books have tracked the birth of this nation, but how he has tracked it, internalized it. One time he said, many, many times, I had to wait for a black cab, whatever that meant, when there was an empty cab on duty stopped right in front of me. He'll shake his head and go away to a place where he's experiencing it again. I had on my uniform, he says, my uniform, he'll repeat. He'll tell me the story about the white friends he used to have as a boy in Tennessee until they grew up. When everybody grew up, Dad says, suddenly they can't hang out with you anymore. Suddenly you a nigger. Nigger. Dad has always been conservative in his use of the word, but that word is never as controversial as when black people try to own it. When white people owned it, they thought nothing of using it, those who weren't as enlightened, who knew better. They understood that when they called their black brothers and sisters niggers, they were taking us out of the category of human, of brother, of sister, and putting us in another place where they could control us by reminding us that we were not equal, that they did not see us as equal. Their brothers and sisters and wives, husbands and daughters were called many other things, but never nigger. There were close calls, though. Nigger lover, yes, and wigger for the white kids who loved us and our culture so much that they appropriated it. But even then, white people could not bring themselves to change just one letter of the alphabet, to just go ahead and change that W to an N. They owned nigger, but some of us own it. There is always that white person who says, with longing and jealousy, if black people get to use that word, why can't we use it? In other words, they are saying, we want to take back what was ours. You can't have it. These young black men with their pants sagging, or even those presumed to be well-educated and cultured, or those who are all those things and more, they say it. So why can't we, some white people ask? They never ask themselves, what do they mean by we? They never ask themselves, why, oh why, are we so desperate to own that word again? My father says it's just a word anyway, and that he is immune. I believe him, half believe him. There is always power in words and language. It's a short trip from being a nigger to being a human being hanging from a tree. Thank you. And it is my pleasure to introduce Douglas Kearney.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the organizers as well. All right, I'm gonna do a new thing, and I'm gonna talk about an old thing, and maybe do a middle thing. So, Manes is a term for ghosts in old Roman religion. Manesology would then therefore be the study of ghosts. Manesology, after Charlottesville, but before it too, shit. They called me to speak on the problem and told me I could from my home, where children's crayons and software are riots of color and murmurs. Sometimes my hours spent as days of spinning my head from years and eras just all the time. In tombstone columns, look, I'd speak on the problem. I do. N and I had happened was misgiving it, as ours in our home. We nicked and dug at it that night, all the while reckoning us as spading at what's ours until we knew what we could do, then kissed a while. This looks like crying when your mouth is your skin. The problem, though, had our numbers, our children's. Good shoes are made of cinders. The pairs stay everywhere they go, even when they haven't been. Since it, the problems, what we must do, have done's the problem. I said, I've been saying, like I got to tote some sick hearts on my back, a gurney. Or my blood, a soap for dirt, their shit made into ours. N said that's why the nerves, the kind of what she say. But that's just what I'm saying is after this problem, we made love. And that's somebody's problem. Over there, we were at it. Our backs, ours. And as though magic, those tombstones slanted to appear a ward, views skewed, thus when your standings to be prone. I say, must I speak on their problem? That when we're making love is it? Poor interviewer chew the detour of their invisible tongue, and the spit they'd spit too would be so clear, so yet thirsty. I speak on a problem. Night after that instance, my daughter clambers our bed for half the night, after reading about ghosts. My son, though, slept, a babe, under blades, fan spinning back to where it started, and to where, and... You don't have to clap. It's all right. It doesn't, I mean, like, I appreciate it. But, like, I couldn't really clap after Dana's piece. You don't have to clap all the time. There are other ways to show it. And that's real. I'm not even like trying to be an asshole. Like, you're here. That's a presence. Awesome. Thank you. No, thank you. Now that my children are safe temporarily. The old thing, I decided I'm going to read something else, but there's a poem in this book called Thank You, but please don't buy my children clothes with monkeys on them. I wrote this poem in 2011, right? And I was self-conscious about possibly reading it today because somebody was like saying, you read that poem a lot. And I was like, okay, well, that's okay, fine. I have new shit. I don't have to read it anymore. And then H&M. And that just goes to show what I'm talking about when we talk about, I can't believe this. Why the fuck can't we? It's the same shit. It's just orange this time. Exactly. All right, so instead I'm going to read something about alternative facts, kind of. This is called Yes Sir Realism. Yes Sir Realism is when someone other than yourself and elsewhere subjectivity determines the nature of your existence. An illustration. Till yesterday, the slave thought fire hot, but master asseverated its chilliness. Insert ineffable utterance here. Master then went on to demand the slave put a hand in to prove master correct. The slave was skeptical of this, but if master is master, then master must be master. He agreed in order to avoid abnegation. Upon inserting the hand attached to the arm attached to the slave into the flames, the slave let out an insert ineffable utterance here. Never had he felt such a hot chill, and he was a smithy, tasked with keeping the master's horses shod. He had been, it seems, frozen singeingly more than once while working the bellows. At that instant, the red and orange ice was making its way up the arm attached to the slave, freezing the shirt sleeves on the arm attached to the slave into smoldering, crackling flurries. What must have been frostbite filled the nostrils attached to the face the master used to identify the slave with the scent master later assured him was just ice cream from over yonder. The hypothermic nips scorched him so badly he couldn't manage even to shiver. What that body the slave was permitted to use for working wouldn't do for the slave, he would set that mind in the head of that body to making so. All those years at the forge, he reckoned the application of hog's lard and chalk treated burns. Fool! He should have sought curatives from chills. Master was master, and certain fire was cold. It was clear to the slave that he had only to do the opposite of what he had done all those years prior, and he would be relieved. But without permission to secure tallow or limestone's antonymous substances, nor knowledge of what they might be, the slave had to make a way of none. The slave recalled that he had recoiled from flame because he thought it had burned him. He came to recognize right then and there that if flames were actually frigid, he ought not have withdrawn his hand. Being hot, of course, is cured by cold. He thrust the hand attached to the end of the arm attached to him back into the fire. Maybe at once the pain ceased. Even master stood agape, amazed at how quickly master's instruction took. Voracious as the slave was for this new learning, he thought back on all of the other lessons master had given. The day is night. That wood is glass. That's a happy work song. Them red roses is actually blue. After a hard day's labor, the slave in fact wasn't tired, just lazy. The slave had thought he understood that one could fall, but one couldn't fly. But master had tutored only a month ago that up was down, and in the slave's benighted ignorance, he had doubted master and earned a lashing. Now he comprehended he only had to fall up. I will stop there. Thank you. If there is any justice in my ridiculous language world, MG is short for my good. But anyway, MG Lord.
Hi, thank you to the organizers and to everybody who's here. I am a humble memoirist, reading a memoir from a book that was published in the fall called We Wear the Mask, about passing in America, in my case, passing as a heterosexual. This will be brief. It's a long essay that begins, in fact, here in Venice, California in 1980 with the random murder of a college classmate who was my first female lover. I was deeply closeted. And the essay continues, the grimness continues, as I reject my authentic sexual self, associating it as I did with random murder, and began a long heterosexual marriage during not one, but two Reagan administrations. What I'll read, and there'll be a little bit of this, again, brief excerpts, lots of ellipses, and I will end with something that, if not exactly hopeful, is at least a tiny bit less grim, and I may mispronounce the name of a famous Czech photographer. Back in the 80s, I learned to hold my tongue at parties that were given by the demand side of my ex-husband's business. Rich straight men were oddly frightened of the disease. One advocated putting people with HIV in camps. Only once, after way too much champagne, did I lose it, ranting about the way President Reagan refused to use the acronym AIDS until a speech in 1987, more than 5 years into the epidemic. My hosts rolled their eyes. My ex-husband, who agreed with me in private but not in front of clients, glared. I was not invited back. Ellipsis. In literature, passing often involves short-term gain and long-term regret. You see this in James Weldon Johnson's novel, The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. Johnson's character, known only as the ex-colored man, is a biracial musician in the Reconstruction South. After witnessing a horrific lynching, he decides to pass as white to stay alive, which he does, but at the cost of his dream, making ragtime music. In Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, the title character swaps passion for passing. Before marrying a man, Clarissa Dalloway loves Sally Seton with a fervor that only afflicts the very young. It was a passion that, Woolf writes, could only exist between women grown up. The charm was overpowering, to her at least, so that she could remember standing in her bedroom at the top of the house, holding the hot water can in her hands and saying aloud, "She is beneath this roof, she is beneath this roof." Okay, now big ellipsis. Big ellipsis and big life change, divorce, and finally, after time embracing my authentic identity. Also a tiny bit of levity before these still grim end. Oddly, when I began dating women, I lost interest in androgyny. I felt comfortable looking like a, quote, woman. I didn't fear being identified as the property of a man. Perhaps because I had moved from New York to Los Angeles, a city of glittering surfaces, I pampered myself with regular pedicures and had my toes painted lavender vermilion and what a character in Claire Booth Luce's The Women called jungle red. I grew my hair, finally allowing my stylist to do what LA stylists have been called by the universe to do, make their clients ever more blonde. 3 years ago, after a decade of being out, I was totally comfortable with female drag. On a tour for my recent book about Elizabeth Taylor, I indulged in fashions inspired by the star. Black cocktail dresses, silk stockings with seams, and the punishing undergarments necessary to sculpt my flesh into Taylor-esque curves. In a recent essay, Gregory Rodriguez described his own insecurity about the identity he projects and the way random strangers gave him miraculous gifts of reassurance. His essay itself, the acknowledgement of this uncertainty, was a gift to me because I'm often unsure about the identity I project. Rodriguez described giving a, quote, nutty, unquote, talk at the Getty Museum about the Czech photographer Josef Kudelka, an artist he had never met, but whose stark depictions of exile and alienation he had admired since college. Afterward, Rodriguez recalled, Kudelka gave him a present. The artist, quote, asserted rather aggressively in his broken English, "You are who you are supposed to be. Some people will hate you. Some people will love you. I love you." I dream that a person will one day tell me, "You are who you are supposed to be." But I don't count on it. As you might imagine, I began this essay in the optimistic summer of 2016, when homophobia really did seem to be in decline. In November of that year, however, the presidential election threw a cruel shadow over my country. The president-elect began assembling a cabinet of bizarre, hate-filled creatures, many of whom endorsed, quote, conversion, unquote, therapy for gay people, and nearly all of whom favored altering federal law to permit discrimination against the LGBT community for, quote, religious, unquote, reasons. The clock was turned back even farther than the 1980s. First, forced to endure an increasingly diverse nation, a straight white mob rallied around a strong man who vowed to restore the soul-devouring conformity of the 1950s. This strong man did not win the popular vote. Millions demonstrated against him, and these millions give me hope. In the 1980s, I felt alone. Today, I feel part of a proud, self-identified group, facing persecution, yet committed to prevail, no longer shamed into passing, believing, now more than ever, you are who you are supposed to be. And now the distinguished poet, Suzanne Lummis.
Okay, I'm going to read some selected excerpts from the 3-page letter. It looks like this. I used expensive stationery and cheap envelopes to 100 members of the Senate, all of those people. And there's a story behind this. The story behind the story might be even more interesting than the letter. I just couldn't stand myself anymore. I felt so helpless and useless and kind of impotent. I know that's not a gender-neutral word, but I felt it anyway. I wasn't doing anything that had an impact, and so I took on this project. I made a mistake. I stamped and addressed about 85 letters, realized I made a mistake. I had to go out, buy more stamps, more stationery. My printer ink subscription company wrote me, said, "You're using too much ink." I don't know how they knew. They know. They are on the other side of the country. They're spying on me. They know everything I'm doing. I had to give them more money. So then I just realized a lot of this has to do with I'm supposed to suffer. This is about me. I need to suffer like a 16th century itinerant Franciscan monk or something like that. So, all right, then I wrote in each, the name of every senator right here. Dated November 16th, 2017. An exercise in futility, by the way, because doesn't seem to have changed the policy and legislation as much as I had hoped. I realize you're busy with large projects and pressing concerns, and I don't want to waste your time, so I'll cover just 2 areas, and these will take the form of lists. What you know, what you don't know. I hope this will be helpful or that some good will come of it. What you know, skipping down a little bit. You know that he demonstrates no loyalty to anyone except to those in his family in whom he sees the reflection of himself. He will praise any who support him or seem to support him. He will excuse the crimes of those who support him or seem to. Some of you in Congress are among those who've been attacked when you did the right thing. And some of you have been defended when doing the wrong thing. You have seen him publicly discard those he once praised when they threaten his security and power. You know that he does not support, either in his language or his actions, as far as he can act without restraint from the legal system, the principles and traditions of democracy. Evidence for this has rolled in steadily since he took office and is most evident in his attacks on the courts, on the rule of law, on justice, his attacks on the free press, on facts, information, on truth. You know what types of heads of state typically attack the press, the processes by which information reaches the people and attacks the rule of law, and they do not head up democracies. You know that for the better part of 2 centuries, children were told a fable about George Washington and a cherry tree, how he'd rather face punishment than tell a lie. We're
not so sure now about the existence of that cherry tree, but tales reveal their own truth. What's certain is that in the beginning, and for generations afterwards, this country, in the main, admired honesty in its leaders. Honesty and moral courage. You know whether you do or whether you don't. You know that the word that most often precedes news of his latest unusual behavior or actions or failure to act is unprecedented. When this word appears, it's never followed by news of an inspiring, eloquent speech, or skillful act of diplomacy, or striking accomplishment. It's always bad. Skipping down through all the examples of that. You know that when his actions are not unprecedented, that's bad too. It's not unprecedented for a president to champion racists, as he did in his pardon of the notorious Sheriff Arpaio, who in his long career was accused of many types of police misconduct and found guilty of criminal contempt for disregarding a court order in a racial profiling case. That's not unprecedented, because James Buchanan, 1791 to 1868, used his influence to support the Dred Scott decision, which determined that a black person could not be an American citizen and therefore could not sue in court. And Andrew Johnson, 1808, 1875, opposed the 14th Amendment, opposed protections for former slaves, and endorsed the Southern states' attempts to deprive freed slaves of their rights. Presidential historians usually rank James Buchanan and Andrew Johnson among the 3 worst presidents in U.S. history. Andrew Johnson was impeached. Further, you know it's not unprecedented for a U.S. president to fire without due cause a high-level appointee who's investigating the president on a criminal charge, as this one did when he fired FBI Director Comey in order to stop the progress of, as he called it, this Russia thing. It's happened before. Sure. One president, in order to shut down an investigation that threatened him, demanded Attorney General Elliot Richardson fire Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, whereupon Richardson resigned. That president then demanded Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus fire Cox, whereupon Ruckelshaus resigned. He then demanded Solicitor General Robert Bork fire Cox, and he did. You know who that president was and how things worked out for him. What you don't know. It's only one thing. Only one thing, apparently, that they don't know, according to this letter. How to deal with Kim Jong-un and the tensions with North Korea. Neither do I. But you know he is the dramatically wrong person to be in charge at this time with regards to this conflict. If a tragedy results, history will survive to report the story, and history will tell the truth. Unequivocally, Suzanne Lummis. All right. Thank you over there in the bleachers, yay. Okay, I want to thank all the individuals and the organizations who assembled us here together, and one of the things they've done for us today that's so important and distinctive is to bring together people of different genres, different types of writing, the great novelists, the great memoirists, the poets, and now, for the first time, I'm going to be able to hear in person and maybe even meet a Pulitzer Prize winner among us, Viet Thanh Nguyen, and good to have you here.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be here, and especially to read from a new book that has just come out. It occurs to me that I Am America, edited by Jonathan Santofler, and it comprises over 50 writers and artists, beginning with Julia Alvarez and ending with Edmund White, and including in between Roz Chast, Art Spiegelman, Neil Gaiman, Walter Mosley, Joyce Carol Oates, Elizabeth Strout, Gyes Jan Hadjin, and many others. So it also benefits the ACLU, by the way. So please tell all your friends, buy copies. I wrote the introduction for this book, although actually I wrote the thing that became the introduction in December 2016. The words still seem relevant today, so I'm going to read from it. I'm a writer. And like all writers, I believe in the power of stories. My first love was literature, especially fiction, and so I was thrilled when I was invited to write a few words to introduce this anthology, which is about the power of fiction to shape and to state who we are. I have a daily reminder of fiction's enduring magic, delivered to me by my son. He's 4 years old. Every morning and evening I read to him. I love the joy he takes in learning new words, immersing himself in stories, seeing himself as the characters, and acquiring a moral and ethical sense. He lives in a fictional world of good and bad, of threat and rescue, of the choice between doing good and doing harm. When I was his age, I had just arrived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It was 1975. I was a refugee and the child of refugees who had fled Vietnam. My parents had neither the time nor the ability to read to me in English, so I took refuge in the local public library. It became my safe space, and books my constant companion. I imagined myself amid the wonders of Manhattan, the bucolic splendor of Midwestern farms, and the stirring and dreadful times of the American Revolution and Civil War. Even if there was no one who looked like me or had a name like mine, through these stories, I became American. As I remembered this during our most recent presidential election, what became clear to me was that the contest for our American identity isn't strictly a political affair. It's also a matter of storytelling. Those who seek to lead our country must persuade the people through their ability to tell a story about who we are, where we have been, and where we are going. The struggle over the direction of our country is also a fight over whose words will win and whose images will ignite the collective imagination. Donald Trump won barely and by the grace of the Electoral College. His voters responded to his call to make America great again, referring to a past when jobs were more plentiful, incomes more stable, and politicians more bold. That kind of nostalgia is powerful and visceral, but it's hard to ignore the subtext. America of the Golden Age, if it ever existed, kept women out of the workplace, segregated and exploited minorities, and restricted immigration by race. It's hardly surprising that the population of much of the literary world is terrified by Mr. Trump's vision of good versus evil, us against them. That opposition isn't just political, but literary. His story contradicts the idea of literature itself. Great literature cannot exist if it is based on hate, fear, division, exclusion, scapegoating, or the use of injustice. Bad literature and demagogues, on the other hand, exploit these very things, and they do so through telling the kinds of stories that demonize others that good literary writers reject. Skip ahead a little bit. Good writers cannot write honestly if they are incapable of imagining what it is that another feels, thinks, and sees. Through identifying with characters and people who are nothing like us, through destroying the walls between ourselves and others, the people who love words, both writers and readers, strive to understand others and break down the boundaries that separate us. It's an ethos summed up by the novelist Colson Whitehead in his acceptance speech at the National Book Awards for his novel, The Underground Railroad. Be kind to everybody, make art, and fight the power. Fighting the power is what the American Civil Liberties Union has done for nearly 100 years. I'm proud that one of my Berkeley classmates, Cecilia Wang, is a deputy legal director of the ACLU. She was an English major, like me, and it is no coincidence that the love of literature has some relationship to the love of justice and liberty. Such love is not partisan, but is a matter of principle, which is why the ACLU has worked with and battled against American presidents of both parties to ensure that our country makes good on its founding premise as the land of the free. After election night, during which my partner, my graduate students, and I drank 2 bottles of scotch, I renewed my commitment to fight the power and to fight for freedom. That was always my mission. I was thinking of it when I named my son Ellison, after the novelist Ralph Waldo Ellison, himself named after the philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. Making my son a part of this lineage, I wanted him to understand the basic paradox at the heart of literature and philosophy. Even as each of us is solitary as a reader or a writer, we are reminded of our shared humanity and our inhumanity. My son need not become a writer, but he will become a storyteller. We are all storytellers of our own lives, of our American identities. I want my son to rise to the challenge of fighting to determine which stories will define our America. That's the choice between building walls and opening hearts. Rather than making America great again, we should help America love again. This is what the writers and artists in this collection do through their insistence that each of us is a part of America. Thank you. Now it's my tremendous pleasure to introduce the great Luis Rodriguez.
So some of you may be aware that I'm working in television. I'm script consultant for a couple of TV shows. I'm only doing one right now. But to be honest with you, I do not like what's on television. I really don't like much of TV. So what I want to do is not really talk about television, but tell a vision. And that vision is that, I'm a writer who resists, but I'm also one that wants to regenerate. The problem with regenerating is the garden I'm working from is poisoned and hurt. You understand what I'm saying? And if I'm not aware of that, I will only regenerate that poison. And the problem with most of us is we're caught up in it. We want to redo this garden, and the garden is not healthy. So it's very hard to think about, well, what kind of garden can we make if this is the one we're in? And one is to recognize that we are people living under many illusions. One, being Mexican is an illusion. You understand what I'm saying? When my mother's Tarahumara native from Chihuahua, Mexico. And we were living in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. When I was born, she went across the international bridge so I could be born in El Paso, Texas. The issue is that the Chihuahua Desert goes from the Chihuahua area, from Tarahumara land, all the way up through El Paso, Texas, and New Mexico. So she was really taking me from our land to our land. But there's an illusion that I'm an immigrant. You understand what I'm saying? It's a crazy lie because somebody put a border there, then now I don't belong. I'm native to this land. And as most native peoples, we never told people don't come here. Everybody was always welcome. The land welcomes everybody, you understand? It's people that don't welcome people. And one of the biggest illusions, and I'm gonna say this and people might think it's unpatriotic, which is fine with me, is the US Constitution is a big illusion. And I don't think that knowledge or history began when the Europeans came here. And the reason why I say it's it's an illusion is because the U.S. Constitution is a limited warranty. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. It's like when you buy a product and they tell you you can only do things in a certain time. If you don't, this thing is void. We Native peoples did not need a guarantee or did not need a constitution to tell us we were free. Especially because our constitution led to a lot of theft. Theft of land, theft of peoples, the theft of their cultures, the theft of their legacies, the theft of their stories, you understand? So I cannot reconcile myself to the U.S. Constitution, and I won't, because I do think that there was great philosophy, thinking, and thoughts way before Europeans came already here. And there's many still here, and we can all contribute. And now people might say, am I against whites or Europeans? White is an illusion. No such concept. Doesn't make any sense. And of course, black and brown people are an illusion in response to it. You understand what I'm getting at? But if we don't get to the heart of that, we're going to just regenerate that old poisonous garden. I don't want to regenerate a garden that says black and brown people have to fight for equality with white people. We don't have to fight for this. You understand? I'm already equal. I'm already a human being. I already belong. And I don't have to challenge or get up to anybody to say that. But I will, because I do resist. But I want to regenerate too. And my regeneration, let's build a new garden. Let's build a new house. Let's put something else, seeds that do something else than what we've been told it needs to be done. So I'm for a seed of a new civilization. The civilization we're in is broken. Now, people can hold on to it, and that's fine. I'm going to hold on to part of it. I'm not totally against everything here, but I'm going to be discerning, and I'm going to decide the parts that are unhealthy and poisonous and hurtful, and I'm not going to hang on to that. Hope I'm making it clear. So I'm going to do an old poem, and it's about one of the shithole countries that President Trump mentioned. Haiti, he talked about Haiti, he talked about apparently Africa, but he also meant apparently was El Salvador. And I've been going to El Salvador for 25 years. They are my family. They are the same indigenous roots as my mother is. And it's a country that has been totally tore up by U.S. policies, U.S. decision-making. And someday I'll talk to you guys about it now, but MS-13 is another illusion made up by this country. You understand? And I know all about them because I work with these kids. And they're like every other troubled kid in the world. Crips and Bloods, Sureño gangs, Chicano gangs, you know, even Italian, Irish gangs, anybody. When you have poverty and you've been deprived, you would join a gang. Makes sense to me. Makes sense why I would want to be on drugs, for crying out loud. I was on drugs for 7 years. Makes sense to me why I became an alcoholic. It all makes sense when you live in this garden. So this poem is called Civilization, and it came about when I was in El Salvador in '93, and I was in the center of San Salvador, the capital. And in those days, there was no even electric lights. There was nothing. There was really rough, dirty, a lot of slums everywhere. If you go there now, parts of it look like Los Angeles. And the slums are still there, but they pushed them out. You know how that goes. Yeah, the slums have gone. They just made sure nobody could see them as well. But when I was there, it was all in your face. And kids that couldn't, there were so many homeless kids in the street. And the only way they could survive was to sniff glue. And the shoemakers would give them the glue because that way they wouldn't have to eat, because you don't want to eat when you're sniffing glue and you'll just die. And that's all they wanted. And then there was death squads that were going around killing kids. And I remember seeing an 8-year-old kid in a ditch with his hand tied behind the back killed. Anyway, one day I was walking and I saw a 7- and a 6-year-old kid, 2 kids trying to cross the street. And again, there was no lights or nothing, so they had to take their chances as the cars going by. And at a certain point, there was a little break in traffic, and they held on to each other and you know they were glue sniffers, and they were hanging on to each other as they walked the street. And I was a glue sniffer in East LA, and I never really grieved my participation. And when I saw this, I cried. They were the same age as my kids, my youngest boys were at then, who are now 29 and 23. So here's my poem. It's an angry poem called Civilization. And it has a quote by Fenton Johnson, the African-American poet Fenton Johnson. I'm tired of building up somebody else's civilization. There are days when sunshine is toxic, when breathing becomes fatal and the love stares of innocence have fangs. There are days when caresses are lethal drumming and the low murmur of a child's voice is a hand slap of hell flames across my face. When all civilization is a squabble in my partner's gaze and morality is a gun at my head. I didn't make this place. So what if I say you can eat it and choke, this heart a choke, this diet of hypocrisies, this horse feed of fed horses, the salt seasoning all wounds. Tear it down. Then wake me up when it's over. Should I care if you don't care? Should I sweat the details when the whole enchilada reeks? Just because you wear a hat and call that fashion, because you love the prison and hate the alien. Don't come to me whining about lost glories. They are lashes on slave skin, the gold stolen off the blanket of stones called our land. They are the tongues cut from wiser heads, the deflowered, dehydrated sirens that called you, then were slaughtered. Don't cry for me, Argentina, or Pennsylvania for that matter. You say I'm no good, but my pathologies are what's keeping me from cutting your throats. All enslavers, all exploiters, all engravers of God money. You who see my children and go insane, who wear the flesh of Nahuas like shiny suits, who have black heels in your nightmares, who eat with chest severed hands, who feed your wives to dogs on cracked plates, who provide heroin to chiseled daughters, who bathe in the trail of tears, who sell tickets to the Middle Passage, whose academies hold literature hostage, and whose culture crumbles in the hand of a glue-sniffing Salvadorian child. Thank you. Now I'd like to bring up Michelle Brittan Rosado.
Thank you so much to the organizers, for all of you being here, to the sponsors of this event. I'm a new parent, and I've been writing poems about this, which has also become writing poems about being a new parent during this time. And my son was born this weekend last year, born on Martin Luther King Day, and which means I was pregnant during the election. And at the same time as the last few days of the election, the house that I live in was being painted, and all of the windows were taped over. It was really dark inside, and it made for an even more surreal atmosphere. This poem, I just have two. This poem is titled Poem to My Unborn Son, the Morning After the Election. Since November began, the painters have been here, stirring their mixtures, preparing for the days ahead, laying down the dark canvas around the grass perimeter outside. First, they papered the windows so that in here when I wake, I can't be sure my eyes are fully open. In the partial light, I make my way through the familiar interior, now suddenly made strange. I count the steps to the kitchen. I'm careful in passing through doorways, slip my body down the hall without touching anything. I think your life thus far must be like this, all subtle movements in the semi-dark, my skin half illuminated by day, then a shade pulled down at night. I read that this is the week your body takes on pigment, the blood red burrowing beneath fat, beneath skin, becoming closer to the color you will learn to wear in a world that will have to decide whether to love you or fear you for it. This is the truth about where we are as the men work outside, the ladders against our walls like sudden thunder. We ready ourselves to be altered completely. The title of this poem is also the first line of the poem. Now that I'm no longer pregnant, the world seems less dangerous. So I don't hold my breath anymore when a man walks past me with lit cigarette, though I suppose the risk was always there. It merely seemed less urgent when it was only me being hurt. And even now, though the poison stitches itself into breast milk I'll give my child in the coming moments, it is only a handful of chemicals in a curtain of disaster I walk through each day with the rest of the human race. And I anoint the one I have brought here with everything terrible that people do to each other. Not because I want to, but because it is inevitable. Because hurt is a thing we share to feel like there is less of it. Because this life is not about choices, it is an inevitable ribbon unfurling from one body to another. It is something you taste from the mouth of a stranger. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce the next reader, Danzy Senna. Thank you.
So great to be here and hear all these amazing writers. I'm going to go back a bit in history. I know all of you are probably familiar with Jonestown and the Jonestown Massacre, which was 40 years ago. And I wrote a novel that came out last year called New People, which the main character is doing her dissertation on the Jonestown Massacre. And I did a lot of research about the People's Temple. And there were several facts that I learned about Jonestown that I hadn't known. You know, we all know the expression, don't drink the Kool-Aid. We know that almost 1,000 people died drinking poisonous Kool-Aid under the guidance and the sort of cult indoctrination of Jim Jones. I didn't know that when you look at the pictures of Jonestown after everyone's died and there's 1,000 bodies there, that the quote above the pavilion where they died, the hand-painted sign they had, read, "Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And I did not know going into this book that the largest group of people to die at Jonestown were black women. So there's a whole racial history of Jonestown that I hadn't been aware of. The story is told from the point of view of a graduate student named Maria, who's engaged to be married and is researching that time. And her fiancé is named Khalil. Khalil is asleep in the bedroom. It is still dark outside. She sits curled in a blanket in the living room. The voices on the radio beside her are talking about a rapper who died tonight. 4 bullet wounds to his neck and chest. They are playing his music on continuous loop. Maria listens for a while before she shuts it off. Her whole body aches. It is still so early. She should go back to bed, but she knows she will not be able to sleep. Instead, she puts on the video of the last night at Jonestown and sits watching it in the gray dusk light. She has seen it so many times before. The footage is grainy. The people in it stand around the pavilion. They are waiting for Congressman Ryan, who is visiting tonight. They are waiting to show him they are happy there. They want to show him their experiment was a success. They want him to know they did it. They created another America. The place they'd advertised in the pamphlet years before had become a reality. Maria watches the footage from the sofa. A woman stands on stage singing a strained, warbling version of Earth, Wind, and Fire's "That's the Way of the World," while the crowd dances and claps. The singer has a beautiful voice. Her name is Deanna Wilkinson. Maria knows her story, knows she was born in 1950, the daughter of a white woman and a black man. When she was small, her parents fought, and one of them threw a pan of burning oil at the other, but it splashed the little girl instead. Deanna's face was badly burned. She was removed from her parents' custody. Deanna was one of the eternally wounded. She'd been born even before Elsa, before the era of mulatto martyrs. She was born in the dark ages of mestizo abandonment. While one side of her face was scarred from the burn, the other side remained smooth and untouched. She roamed from one temporary shelter to another until she found Jim Jones. He saved her life. He told her to get on that Greyhound bus and go with him to California. She followed him there, and she followed him to Guyana. She never gave up on Jim Jones, and she never stopped being ashamed of the scars on one side of her face. On the final night at Jonestown, while the old people smiled their stiff smiles and danced their stiff dances, Deanna sang Earth, Wind, and Fire. In the video, Congressman Ryan gets on stage. He looks exactly like an actor Maria has seen in made-for-television movies. His wording is careful, awkward. He says into the microphone that the few people he has spoken to that evening have expressed to him that this is the best place they've ever been. This is the best thing that has ever happened to them. Before he can say more, the crowd drowns him out with wild, unending applause. He tries to continue with his speech, but the crowd is manic. The applause has the sound of a kind of silencing mob drown out, more than approval. There is a tarnished, macabre quality to the footage. If you look past the smiles, the dancing, the laughter, the people in the crowd look tired and dirty and thin and coated in a layer of jungle sweat. They are malnourished. Their joy and applause feel manic and desperate. Jim Jones has been coaching them for weeks, teaching them how to make a work camp look like a socialist utopia. He has fed them well for the first time in a year. He's told them to pick something nice to wear from a pile of communal clothing. They have done a good job of pretending. But it is there, if you look closely. It is there in certain shots when Maria freezes the footage. Outside, the light in the sky is brightening, edging toward morning. Jim Jones is speaking on camera, his eyes hidden behind his signature sunglasses. He is speaking directly to the cameraman, the one he will murder at the airstrip later. People play games, friend, he is saying. They lie. They lie. What can I do about liars? Anybody wants to get out of here, they can get out of here. They have no problem about getting out of here. They come and go all the time. Thank you. Our next reader is Phil Taggart.
I want to thank you all for being here and all of you for doing this. This is really important work. I want to start this reading with a quote from Haruki Murakami from his book, A Wild Sheep Case. And the book is, "Sure, we're tossing out fluff, but tell me, where does anyone deal in words with substance? Come on, now. There's no honest work anywhere." And what he's talking about, of course, is he's building up a character in this book who owns a political, it's right there. He owns a political party, he owns the media, and he controls it through the stock market. And this is the person that's kind of driving the story, and we never meet this person. Television has an epigraph from a song by Ollie Powers. If it's on TV, it must be real. It is just a calculated distraction, a streaming of pointless nostalgia, dolls talking the human condition with cleavage, cosmetics, and smile. They tell us the truth. It's blinding light, blued, filtered, and we're told the story. And we know it's not the truth, but we want to believe. Now, what has happened is with the shrinking of local media and everything kind of shrinking, and we're losing our local media, it's shrinking away. But there's still a way that we need to be able to communicate with people, how it can be communicated through television, radio, social media, ... And we came up with this thing called computer algorithms. This wonderful thing called computer algorithms, a mathematical approximation of what we think and want. And this is a poem kind of about that. I want to be sedated. This was a B-side the boys recorded in '78. It's on my car radio, K-Earth Oldies 101. As I drive into work, turned up to drown out, drown out. The LA Times, an extra edition. 2 days in a row, mass killings, mass killings. Although the tune became a staple for the Ramones, arguably their most popular, didn't make the charts back then. A man with a gun walks into a room, shooting. Week after week of police killings, police being killed. The song was about touring too much. Overwhelmed, overworked, and only working. Rage and fear turned off social discourse. No discussion, no compromise. This is a riot in slow motion. The radio algorithms that continually plop, I want to be sedated, in my car, make sense, especially now. 2020, 24 hours to go. I want to be sedated. I want to be sedated. Now, one of the things that would happen with the loss of local media and a loss of really free speech locally, with the algorithms and all this is happening, is getting us, we're dealing with emotions, and they're being addressed. Our ideas and stuff are being addressed with emotions. And so the emotion that seems to come up a lot is fear, and with that, rage. This poem is Walking the Dog in a Time of Rage. The minivan screams by, horn blaring, angry, fist out the window. I must have done something wrong. Rage has become our discourse, our answer, anger our voice, sputtering away in the ether, on the highways, in the ballot box. We're driving through a park, not a very big one. Only one entrance, one parking lot. We're both approaching. I wonder if he's going to the farmer's market too. My friends online nip at each other, clever quips bite. I pass his vehicle, drive to the other side of the parking lot as far away as possible. The anger swirls inside. We don't know what to do. A white man in his 40s gets out of the van, sets his dachshund down, pulls a baseball bat from the back seat, looks at me. Marcia and I go look for Brussels sprouts. But part of me wants to stay. I'm angry too. Walk over to him. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? Celebrate this rage, consecrate it with our blood on the ground flowing. We find yellow squash instead. On the other side of the park, there's the man, his dachshund, his baseball bat. Up next is... Thank you. David Hernandez.
That thing's gonna move. Okay. I won't move it. Sorry. All right. I'm just gonna read 3 poems. Wow, this place is packed. It's very exciting. This is necessary, what we're doing. If you've ever double parked or split 2 parking spaces, this is not about you. The first line, or rather the title, goes into the first line. Those of us who have double parked are just as selfish as those of us who have split 2 parking spaces. There are those of us who label those kinds of people assholes, who think the insult or shape it to sound, and those of us who ink it to napkin before wedging the flimsy paper square underneath his wiper blade. I said his because, come on, let's be real. Let's be surreal and picture a woman hogging 2 spots with a lifted truck. So uncouth, so parachute, her sailing to the ground wearing a blue dress. Now a man arrives in a modest car who recognizes her, that poised stride, a rapid mind, 2 cubicles from his. Same gig, and yet she gets the bigger paycheck. It deflates his self-esteem. Those extra dollars, her taking more spaces than she needs. He parks reasonably, so considerate, so swan, his gliding toward the office building in a blue dress, the company uniform. This next poem is about, I just wanted to mention Ai Weiwei is a conceptual artist and activist, and from 1995 to 2003, he had a series called Study of Perspective, in which he flipped off government monuments and buildings. And I'll just leave it at that. Ai Weiwei's middle finger, his left hand, because his right held the camera to click the shutter, his gesture rising defiantly from the bottom of the frame, hovering between the lens and the White House. South Lawn, I can tell by the absence of wrought iron bars, by the stretch of sunlight and tree-shadowed grass. Looks like 5 p.m., the way the light slices sideways from the west. About an hour until nightfall. 2017 feels like this spring, that it won't be long before the start of darkness, the end of us. If you haven't yet, now is a good time to speak up, oppose, open the hose of your voice to counter their cruelty. If not now, then in 10 seconds. Heave the words out of your silence. Type or ink it down. Post or paint the letters across cardboard. Me, I wish I could push my arm through his sleeve and see my own hand pop out of the cuff to say, fuck off. The end of us sounds hyperbolic, I know. But last week, I asked my wife casually if we had the right pills to kill us both, just in case. She said no, and later on the phone, asked her friend the same question. I overheard from the kitchen as I julienned a red pepper, careful not to nick my fingertips. Now that I think about it, a knife and tabletop will do. Anything sharp against anything flat. Scrape and carve with enough strength for strangers to hear you, should the light be taken from us. Thank you to the organizers of this event. This is wonderful. Okay. I don't talk much between poems. All-American. I'm this tiny, this statuesque, and everywhere in between. And everywhere in between, bony and overweight, my shadow cannot hold one shape in Omaha, in Tuscaloosa, in Aberdeen. My skin is mocha brown, 2 shades darker than taupe. Your question is racist, nutmeg, beige. I'm not offended by your question at all. Penis or vagina? Yes and yes. Gay or straight? Both boxes. Bi, not bi, who cares? Stop fixating on my sex life. Jesus never leveled his eye to a bedroom's keyhole. I go to church in Tempe, in Waco, the one with the exquisite stained glass, the one with a white spire like the tip of a Klansman's hood. Churches creep me out. I never step inside one, never utter hymns. Sundays, I hide my flesh with camouflage and hunt. I don't hunt, but wish every deer wore a bulletproof vest and fired back. It's cinnamon, my skin. It's more sandstone than any color I know. I voted for Obama, McCain, Nader. I was too apathetic to vote, too lazy to walk 1 block, 2 blocks to the voting booth. For or against a woman's right to choose? Yes, for and against. For waterboarding, for strapping detainees with snorkels and diving masks. Against burning fossil fuels. Let's punish all those smokestacks for eating the ozone. Bring the wrecking balls, but build more smokestacks. We need jobs here in Harrisburg, here in Kalamazoo. Against gun control, for cotton bullets, for constructing a better fence along the border. Let's raise concrete toward the sky. Why does it need all that space to begin with? For creating holes in the fence, adding ladders. They're not here to steal work from us, No one dreams of crab walking for hours across a lettuce field so someone could order the Caesar salad. No one dreams of sliding a squeegee down the cloud-mirrored windows of a high-rise, but some of us do it. Some of us sell flowers, some of us cut hair, some of us carefully steer a mower around the cemetery grounds. Some of us paint houses. Some of us monitor the power grid. Some of us ring you up, while some of us crisscross a parking lot to gather the shopping carts into one long, rolling, clamorous, and glittering backbone. Thank you. And now, Chris Terry.
Thank you. This is wonderful. We've really generated a lot of very positive energy in this room, I feel like. And I hope as we step out of this enclosed space into a world that is not as kind, we can bring some of that energy with us. We can raise our kids to be the kindness that needs to be present in this world. We can cuss out our Republican aunts and uncles, and maybe slash the tires of a few cop cars as well. What do you say? Yeah? Okay, good. I wrote a book called Magical Negroes. It comes out next year. It's about a mixed-race punk rock musician who goes on a mission to win back his black card. There's the sort of physical manifestation of his credibility as a black person. This is from the very beginning of the book, and he's a teenager. It's a prologue that happens a few years before the rest of the story, so it doesn't need too much setup. Here we go. 4 months in Richmond, and I was finally black again. I sat on my bed, waiting for proof. Gray smoke oozed under my bedroom door and through the crack where window pane met frame. The popping of needle on vinyl started so loud that I rubbed my thumb across 4 fingertips, expecting to clench the sound. A grimy hip-hop beat kicked in, with distorted drums, bass that rolled a pencil across my desk, and half a measure of a soul singer wailing, looping on repeat. I steeled myself against the hurricane, pushing toes against floor, elbows against knees as I leaned in and bobbed my head, short but loose, striking that 10th grade balance of icy cool outside and whirring inside. Still, I jumped when Lucius kicked the bedroom door open. His baggy jeans made a flag in the wind snap as he stomped his boot. A black hoodie covered the top half of his face, but not his sparse goatee or the zit under his right cheekbone. I watched in silence, averting an identity crisis with every word I didn't say and every gesture that I did not make. The door slammed shut behind him, and he stepped to the middle of the small room, a husky specter floating in the sickly light. He jabbed his chin at me, and I stood to face him, thumbs in my hoodie's kangaroo pocket, shoulders and head back, equally ghoulish. "You had a big day, bro," he said. His voice was deep and rough for a teenager, cutting through the rap beat. I nodded. "Let's see the highlights." He stepped to my right and pointed at the closed door. A beam of light shot through the opening between my curtains, and a 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown flickered above the doorknob. Lucius crossed his arms, and we stood side by side on the scuffed floorboards, watching the makeshift screen. Part 1. Black and white footage of me in a polyester PE uniform, standing on a gleaming wood floor. My eyes widen in surprise when a basketball lands in my hands. I seem to push it away. The camera follows the ball's arc over the paint and through the net. There's a quick pan back to my face, shifting into a sunny grin as I hit a 3-part handshake with another kid and hustle off camera. "All right," Lucius said. "You were lucky to hit that shot. But the daps at the end sealed the deal, and I'm glad we've been practicing." I nodded. "Me too." Then kept my head moving with the beat, and we turned back to the door for part 2. A montage of me standing at my school bus stop with a slim backpack slung from one shoulder, slouching at a desk in class, and sprawling alone on my grandparents' couch, watching TV. In each shot, my eyes sparkle, my nose wrinkles, and I bring the top of my right fist to my mouth like I'm rocking an invisible microphone. "Now that's the way we laugh," said Lucius. "We don't cheese. They don't need to see our teeth. This ain't a slave auction." I did a pursed-lipped smile, then flipped my hood up over my head. Part 3. Me on my bed an hour before, cradling a phone to my shoulder and raising an eyebrow. The music in the room quiets to forefront the staticky voice of one of my old friends up north whining, "I can't understand you. Did you just say you wanted to ask me something?" Mm-hmm. Lucius ran his eyes over my pale, freckled face and kinky red-brown hair. "Your mixed ass might not really look like us, but the least you can do is try and sound like us." I smiled again, agreeing silently. Lucius punched my shoulder, then we repeated the handshake that I did in PE, finishing by bumping chests to fists. Lucius stood back. The music cut out and the light grew angelic and bright. I sat on the bed as he swelled his chest and spoke with the gravity of an award presenter. "I know you've been having your doubts. You were black by default growing up around those white folks in the suburbs. But this move changed a few things. You finally got around us brothers and realized that those rap tapes don't make you black." He pointed to my dresser, where hip-hop and alternative rock cassettes mingled freely on a plastic rack. "Think about how far you've come," he said. "The basketball players in your history class stopped clowning you for asking why they call each other Shorty. You stopped wearing that Beastie Boys shirt." He shook his head sadly at my Raggedy Andy-looking fro. "If only we could get you to a barber on the regular." I smiled sheepishly and touched my hair, my blackest feature. "Still," Lucius continued, "you realize that dropping the G from skateboarding didn't make it any less white boy." He held the palm up. "Now, I know you've been showing me these skateboard magazines, and they got some brothers in there, but it doesn't go like that down here in Virginia. We're old school down south. Besides, you've got to know the rules before you break them." I fought the urge to roll my eyes and used my heel to nudge my skateboard further under the bed. Lucius continued, hands joined inside his hoodie pocket. "I know you've been going through some tragic mulatto nonsense since you got here, feeling like no place is your place, but I see you working hard, and it's starting to come natural." Lucius paused, watching me whip fist to mouth a second too late to cover my grin, then said, "That's why I'm finally presenting you with this." Triumphant horns blared as Lucius slowly drew his right hand from his pocket, thumped it on his heart, and then held a wallet-sized, laminated card up next to his face. A heart-swelling soul song kicked in, and I craned forward. "Black Card" was written on the front in gold, diamond-encrusted capital letters. I reached for it, grinning, so happy to be a real brother. Lucius pulled it close. "Hold up." He turned my black card over in his hand as the music faded out. "Brother," he said, and sized me up. I puffed my chest and ran my tongue across the front of my teeth. "I hereby bestow you with this black card. Carry it with you as proof that you're one of us because..." He squinted and started to read from the back of the card. "This card entitles the brother or sister who bears it to all black privileges, including but not limited to use of the N-word, permission to wear flip-flops and socks, extra large bottles of lotion, use of this card as a stand-in for the big joker in a spades game, and, most importantly, a healthy and vocal skepticism of white folks, aka crackers, aka honkies, to be renewed in 10 years upon evaluation." Thank you. Lynne Thompson, you are our next reader. Everyone clap.
Thank you. It's just really good to be in a room where people are as pissed off as I am. I'm going to read this piece. Some of you will recognize it as a song. Those of you who do will be eternally grateful that I'm not going to sing it. Kathy, I know you're out there. "For Women" by Nina Simone. My skin is black. My arms are long. My hair is woolly. My back is strong. Strong enough to take the pain inflicted again and again. What do they call me? My name is Aunt Sarah. My name is Aunt Sarah. My skin is yellow. My hair is long. Between two worlds, I do belong. My father was rich and white. He forced my mother late one night. What do they call me? My name is Saffronia. My name is Saffronia. My skin is tan, my hair is fine, my hips invite you, my lips like wine. Whose little girl am I? Anyone who has money to buy. What do they call me? They call me Sweet Thing. They call me Sweet Thing. My skin is brown. My manner is tough. I'll kill the first mother I see. My life has been rough. I'm awfully bitter these days because my parents were slaves. What do they call me? My name is Peaches. Thank you. Thank you, Nina. We miss you. Boy, if she was here now. She's here, right? She's here. I'm reading this for my father, an immigrant, not from a shithole country. The Van Dyke. First launched February 1921, full throttle from Montevideo, Pernambuco, Barbados, then on to New York. Fortnightly services she gave to the hoi polloi, and a fine lot of them came aboard. Anna Pavlova and her corps de ballet bedazzled on the main deck, while Shackleton, the Arctic explorer, was sailing his last springtide topside. Still, lower decks for lesser classes were the best place for hijinks and hardtack. This is their history, too. Ellis Island's logbooks tell tales of the Portuguese, Chinese, Italians, and Caribbean Brits, of the Silvas and Paynes who came to Brooklyn, but not until every alien answered, "Who paid for your passage? How much money are you bringing? Are you deformed, a polygamist, an anarchist?" Each was examined. In 1923, A.R. Jenkins, M.D., inspected young schoolmaster Thompson, who came, like so many others, crossing after crossing, coveting America's normalcy. A grenadine, young Thompson, my daddy, my old man, history's onlooker, a witness to how it all dissolves to watery graves. And I'll close with this piece. It was written by Devorah Major. Some of you may know her work. Written originally for the political prisoner Mamil Abu Jamal. I am reading it for all the political prisoners and for the rest of us who feel like political prisoners. I need to. On continuing to struggle. I don't want to write a memorial poem in commemoration of the fact that another knot was tied in our tongues. I don't want to write, "We gave more blood to water their poison crops" poem, the on reviewing the execution of another black man poem. A man who could see through cells without windows, who could speak though bound and gagged, who could lead under chain behind bars from isolated chambers while penned in a land where, as a matter of policy, family is forbidden to touch except through glass. Who of us could hold their heart intact? Who of us could keep their vision so strong that others become bright in its glow? I do not want to write "We tried but ain't it a shame" poem, the "What a goddamn crime" poem, the "We did all we could but still" poem, the "They won this round, we'll have to get them next time" poem, the "Lost more ground this time" poem, the "They killed him anyway" poem, the "We didn't stop them. Poem. I'm not going to carry banners of defeat and wear shackles of resignation. I say I want to sing praises in celebration, not through mourning. Say I want to give thanks for my community that is birthing new freedoms, not burying fresh kill. I'm gonna work on the road is long, but we still truckin'. Poem. Gonna work on the making sure there are better days ahead. Poem. Work on the free Mumia. Poem. Work on freeing Mumia. Work on seeing Mumia free. Thank you. And I am very, very happy that it's me that gets to introduce David Ulin.
Oh, thanks, Lynn. I'm also pissed off, and I'm exhausted, which is why I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we're all here because it's energizing to be here. And I also think that, you know, it's a different situation than last year when we were here, because last year when we were here, we were projecting what we were going to get into, and now we know. So that can actually be a good thing for us, for clarity. So, you know, and we are also in a year where we can do some stuff. So I think we all ought to commit to flip some districts this year. In this state, in Orange County, and in Santa Clarita, northern San Diego County, we could actually do some damage, good damage. So let's make sure we keep an eye on that. I am going to read short because I'm the second to last reader, and you've all been sitting here really patiently for a long time. Over the summer, as I was trying to avoid working on the book I'm writing, I began to write a small series of kind of diaristic poems, which were really sort of focused on paying attention, sort of staying in the moment. And I began to think about the idea of home, partly because both my kids were home for the summer, which is not a common occurrence. So this is one of these poems. Most of the poems I thought really sucked. This one I didn't think was so bad. So I'm going to share it with you. There are a lot of pages to the poem, but I write short lines, so there are not that many words. It's called Porch. I like utilitarian titles. Early mid-July, late on a Sunday, avenue so empty, I can imagine almost I am somewhere else. Then a burst of fireworks and a jet descending into LAX. I am on the porch, riding out this heat wave, not waiting for my daughter, although I know that's what she's thinking when she returns home early from dinner with friends. It's the last summer before she goes to college, and since graduation I have watched as she has molted, shedding us as if we were old skin. These milestones, they mark us just as the years do. They are what render us distinct. This summer I will pay attention, not allow these moments to slip away from me, refuse to let them slide. And yet who knows really what will happen. Here I am, perhaps a beer or two beyond my limit, sitting in the quiet porch lit low. My son, he installed these lights, not last year, but the one before that, after he moved back in the first time. Now he's living here again for summer only, or at least that's what we've agreed. He's at work. We'll be home by 2 or 3, or whenever the club closes. Although these last few nights I haven't heard him, which makes me wonder what attention means. Is it vigilance or relaxation? Is it holding on or letting go? Instead of deciding, I remain outside, feet propped on the wrought iron of the garden rail, while in the distance the city emits its low and ambient buzzing, like a rumble in the chest of the earth. To the south, another run of fireworks, although the 4th is past us. A car creeps up the avenue, but no one can see me. A siren echoes in some other corner of the night. But after, silence, stillness. Although the city, it is not quite sleeping. It is inhaling, catching its breath as a breeze stirs, first one in days, through all this searing swelter, and above my head, the leaves of sycamore rustle, reminder that in the morning, or even now, the world will wake, will start to move again. Thank you. And the last reader, right? Our last reader is Emily Vizzo. Please welcome Emily.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to share just one poem, and it takes for its title a line from a book written by David McCulloch. It's a history of the construction of the Panama Canal. And when I read the line, I started to think about how a president can shape the physical world. And there are a couple quotes in the poem as well that are drawn from an interview with Dr. Karen Barad, who is a professor at UC Santa Cruz. And she is a professor of feminist theory and the history of human consciousness. And she thinks about and writes about matter and how matter moves. And so you'll see that in the poem as well. Theodore Roosevelt never returned to Panama. He never saw the Panama Canal. The mind is an idea of the body, a tool that keeps getting used out of habit, a tool that is too easy to use. Reading and writing are ethical practices. Reading and writing are big spoons and little spoons. The entanglement of matter and meaning. The entanglement of big spoons and little spoons. Can you tell me what is so beautiful about that? Can you tell me what is so beautiful about spoons? Everywhere you look, it is the same. Everywhere you look, it is the same different spoons. Cuts do violence, but also open up and rework. Cuts do violence, but also open up the body. There is not knowing from a distance. There is not knowing about spoons. If I am at Love Canal in the United States, a populated area where a bunch of toxins were dumped and the people were getting cancers, then I might want to evacuate the people. On the other hand, if I am at the Mayo Clinic where they are treating cancer patients and there are a lot of people with cancer, it is not the thing to do. Waves are disturbances in fields. Waves are disturbances like the idea of bodies. When two waves meet, crest to crest, they make a higher wave. When two waves meet, crest to crest, they act like waves. But there is no disturbance here, remember? But there is no possibility of being erased either. The issue is not one of erasure. The issue is entanglement, the big spoon, little spoon. Being is threaded through with mattering. Being is threaded through with entanglement. All bodies, including but not limited to human bodies, come to matter. All bodies, including but not limited to human bodies, act like waves. Ethics is about mattering. Ethics is about the smallest cuts mattering. Attention to the tissue of ethicality that runs through the world. Attention to the possibility of spoons. Thank you. And I'd like to invite my fellow organizers, Jim and Lynn, to join me up here for our concluding remarks.
Are we doing something?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you so much to all of the readers who were just absolutely transporting, different, diverse, gorgeous. I love you all. What we're doing is so important. What you all are doing, readers, writers alike. Keep up the fight. We'll see you next year, unfortunately, probably. Unless we have something to celebrate.
That's right. Next year, a celebration, not a resistance.
Woo-hoo! Thank you. Thank you. Buy buttons. Join organizations. Thank you. Great.
Good job.
I loved your reading.
Oh, thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Good job. Group up. Group up.
Absolutely.